Mysterious deaths, missing people, unexplained phenomenon. Sometimes these aren't just tall tales you tell around the campfire to scare your friends. No, in some cases they're all too real. So forget ghost stories. Here's a look at some real unsolved mysteries that will keep you up all night. Early in the morning of December 1st, 1948, people strolling on the Somerton Beach in Australia discovered a body lying in the sand. And that discovery launched one of the country's most enduring mysteries. Following an investigation, authorities revealed some of the weird details. The body belonged to a man who coroners said was in, quote, top physical condition. There were no signs of trauma and no sign of how or why the man died, though they believed he had been poisoned. There were also no clues to the man's identity because, strangely, not only was he missing identification, all the tags in his clothing had been cut out. Authorities did, however, find a cryptic note secretly sewn into his clothes, the Persian phrase, "Tamam shud," which means finished. It had been torn out of an 11th century book of poetry entitled The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The book was later found, and inside was some kind of encoded message using a cipher that still hasn't been broken. There was also a phone number, which turned out to belong to a woman who lived nearby, and who swore she didn't know the man at all. Some speculate he may have been a Soviet spy who was covertly murdered, while others think he was a scorned lover who took his own life. Scientists are hoping DNA tests may soon solve the riddle, but until then, the identity of Somerton Man and the circumstances surrounding his death remain a mystery. In 1959, 9 cross-country trekkers disappeared in Russia's Ural Mountains. Weeks later, the remains of their camp were found on the slopes of a mountain named Kholat Syakhl, which means Dead Mountain. What searchers found continues to baffle people to this day. Hikers had apparently cut their way out of their tent in the middle of a terrible storm and run into the freezing night, some not even wearing shoes or socks. 2 bodies were found wearing only underwear, while 3 more were found with massive internal injuries similar to what you'd expect from a high-speed car crash, but with no corresponding external wounds. And perhaps strangest of all, 2 of the corpses were found to be radioactive. Theories range from an avalanche to secret Soviet military testing to an animal or even Yeti attack. Some even think they were murdered. The truth, however, remains buried beneath the ice. In the 1930s, the remote Galapagos Islands suddenly gained new life when Ecuador decided to open it to colonists. Little Charles Island gained 3 families, one of which was eccentric indeed as it consisted of an Austrian named Eloise de Wagner-Bousquet and her 2 lovers, Robert Philipson and Rudolf Lorenz. Nicknamed the Baroness, or the Empress of the Galapagos, Wagner-Bousquet and her partners lived a bigger-than-life, free-love lifestyle, becoming such darlings of the media that they even starred in a short movie filmed on the island. But the bliss didn't last. On March 27, 1934, the Baroness and Philipson disappeared. Lorenz told their neighbors that the pair had left the island for America after being picked up by a yacht belonging to friends. Not long after, Lorenz himself decided to leave the island and boarded a small boat manned by a Norwegian fisherman. None of them were ever seen alive again. Lorenz and the fishermen's bodies were found months later. The 2 died of dehydration after being marooned on an island with no fresh water. An island that mysteriously was nowhere near the planned path of travel. As for the Baroness and Philipson, no sign of them was ever found. It's possible they safely arrived in America and lived out their lives in anonymity, but most believe Lorenz murdered the pair and fled to escape justice. Hannibal, Missouri is famous as the home of Mark Twain, who immortalized his childhood explorations of the town's extensive cave system in books like Tom Sawyer. But in May 1967, the town's mythology took a tragic turn when 3 boys apparently entered the caves and were never seen again. Construction on Route 79 had opened up new sections of an extensive cave complex, and witnesses say they saw young brothers Billy and Joel Hogue enter those caves, even though just the night before, the 2 had been explicitly warned by their parents not to go near the caves. They disobeyed, though, and vanished, along with friend Craig Dowell. A massive search was mounted, with experienced spelunkers joining the FBI to map the entire cave system, but the boys were nowhere to be found. One of the boys' sisters has said she believes the boys went into one of the construction holes on the Route 79 dig and were accidentally buried alive by workers. More than half a century later, the truth still remains elusive. In 1860, an author named Robert Dale Owens published a book called Footfalls on the Boundary of Another World. In it, he recounts the story of a woman named Emile Sagay. She was a teacher in the 1840s who was reportedly haunted by a ghostly doppelganger who would appear out of thin air, in full view of Sagay's students, and then vanish. At times, this spectral twin would even appear independently of Sergei, showing up once in a classroom of 42 shocked students while the real Sergei obliviously picked flowers right outside the classroom window. Which leaves two mysteries. How could this happen? And did it actually happen? The account from Dale Owens was repeated by so many authors that it is now widely assumed to be true. But it seems it had just a single source, a 19th century mystic named Baroness Julie von Guldenstube. So she was just making it up? And if she wasn't, what could possibly explain the phenomenon she described? So far, nobody knows for sure.